Thank you for joining in this discussion on future of work, people and organizations brought to you by Boston Consulting Group and Speakin. I'll quickly introduce the panelists for today. Uh, First of all, we have Mr. Pratik Gunta. He's the managing director and partner in the Mumbai office of Boston Consulting Group. He's a core member of BCG's financial institutions practice with over 18 years of experience in advising banks and FIs. He also leads the people and organization practice in India and has advised many clients on people strategy, organization structure, and change management. Thank you, Pratik, for joining this discussion. Next, we have Nim Sivakumaran. Uh, we with a career spanning 15 years across Southeast Asia, Hong Kong, Australia, and the United Kingdom. Nim is a well recognized thought leader and a super connector within the region. As the head of the co based in Singapore, he has are actively involved in with connecting the ecosystem ranging from innovation teams, VCs, startups, and hypergrowth companies. Thank you, Nim, for taking time out for this discussion.
Thanks for the intro.
Uh, Next, we have Paul Dubois. He's a global leader with a commendable track record in hands-on business growth and organizational transformation leadership. And he's currently the managing director and CEO of Randstad India. A recognized thought leader in the HR services space, Paul is a frequent speaker in media and professional associations, as well as a regular columnist in Forbes and other leading publications. Thank you, Paul, for your time today for this.
Thank you, Nijansh. Thanks for having me.
Today's session is moderated by Mr. Suresh Malingam. He has been a dynamic catalyst of change for over 30 years in corporate India. He has an extensive experience at senior leadership roles in BFSI and FMCG sectors, and his inclusive work style and hands-on experience to leadership has led to success in setting up and scaling organizations. Currently, Suresh is an independent director in Aviva India and principal asset manager. Thank you, Suresh, for structuring and moderating today's session. And now I hand over to you for taking this forward.
Thanks, Nijans, and welcome all of you. I'm sure the next course of 1 hour is going to be very interesting discussions on this subject. What I will try and do is lay the context first, and then ask you questions individually and a combination of questions where all panelists can answer. Just to set the context right on this beautiful topic of future of work, people, and organization. COVID-19, as all of us are aware, has dramatically changed the way many jobs are done, and organizations are now planning how best to extract the benefits from those changes as they prepare for the business after the pandemic subsides. Now, greater digitization and automation, increased reliance on remote work have the potential to deliver better productivity, lower costs, and enhance resilience. We are living through a fundamental transformation in the way we work. Automation and thinking machines are probably replacing human tasks and jobs and changing the skills that organizations are looking for in their people. One may now ask a very relevant, pertinent question: is there value in the years of experience that people have acquired over the years versus the new skills that need to be acquired? Competition for the right talent is fierce, and talent no longer means the same as 10 years ago. Many of the roles, skills, and jobs titles of tomorrow are unknown to us as of today. How can, therefore, organizations prepare for the future? How will your talent needs change? How can you attract, keep, and motivate the people you need? And what does all this mean for HR? These momentous changes raise huge organizational talent and HR challenges. One silver lining from the pandemic is that companies have found that they can adopt new technologies much faster than they previously thought. There will be challenges in managing a workforce that is working partly remotely and partly in person. Companies will need to reconstruct work. Companies need to reconstruct how work is done, decide which employees and roles are best suited for remote work, and reconfigure and rethink the workplace. Therefore, how can you create a virtual organization fostering an ecology of partnerships. How do you create that? How do you create tomorrow from the room? The year 2020 has brought a whirlwind of change in the existing ways of working, and there is a widespread discussion about the future of work. To help us learn more and understand how one can embrace the changes and discuss how the future is shaping up for workplaces, organizations, and the people, we will get perspectives from Pratik, Paul, and Nim Shivakamaran. So welcome, gentlemen, and I will start the process of questions. Few questions will be directed at, I will name you and I'll ask you the questions. There will be some questions where all panelists can answer those questions. And if there are some points of view on any specific question asked to any specific individual, if you have a point, please do jump it. And I'll try and keep it very interactive, very lively, and we'll take the process forward. So Pratik, the first question is for you.
Sure.
I've read your BCG report, and it's a very interesting report that BCG has recently brought out. And some of those statements resonate a lot. But what I was intrigued was through a bold statement that I saw in the first paragraph of the report itself, where it says that although the COVID-19 pandemic has led to economic, health, and and social devastation, it has also created an unprecedented opportunity to run the world's biggest ever workplace experiment. Would you like to throw some light on this opportunity first, and then we will build it from there?
So what we did, Suresh, for this report and the article which has come out, we've actually surveyed about 12,000 employees across different geographies, including Americas, Europe, and parts of Asia, including India, to understand over the last 9 odd months what's working well and what's not really working well in this new way of working. If you look at it holistically, actually, there were many changes already happening in the way people are working over the last few years. There was increasing appreciation of the climate footprint. There was general well-being that was at the back of mind of employers and employees. I think what COVID has done, it has probably fast forwarded some of those trends by maybe about 10 years and forced the consciousness on changing our styles of working and the way we operate. So what came out from this survey, couple of highlight messages, which is what prompted the statement that you just referred to. I think 75% of people that we polled who had to operate in an individual capacity felt that their productivity had gone up in the last 9 months. What was even more interesting is 51% of people who had to collaborate in their workplace also felt that their productivity had gone up, even while working remotely, which means that if implemented with the right spirit and with the right tools, remote working can actually have more positive outcomes for the organization than negative outcomes. Obviously, we need to solve for things like affiliation and engagement, and there are many experiments that companies around the world are doing on those dimensions. But once we are able to solve for that, I think collectively we believe that a hybrid working model is probably here to stay.
Okay. No, so I think you made some very pertinent points in terms of productivity, collaboration, remote working, hybrid, and those are some of the points that I will touch as the conversation goes forward, because these are probably few determinants that kind of shape the future of the workplace. So therefore, the next question to all of you, and I'll probably start with Paul first, and then go to Nim, is that you've heard Pratik talk about productivity, you've heard Pratik talk about collaboration, you heard Pratik talk about remote working, hybrid, and we will touch these points in detail subsequently. But if you were to list the top 3 determinants that will shape the future of work going forward, what would they be? And if you can quickly expand 1 or 2 of them, because I'm sure some of the points will carry on to some of my other questions that I have already lined up. But Paul, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Suresh, and back to Pratik's comments as well. I read the same report, and thank you for that, Pratik. Very insightful, and matches with a lot of the data that we have at Randstad. We've done our own reports on the same topic, the future of work. Well, first of all, it starts with people. I think all of our conversations, and Pratik said it very well, something that was in the shadows, was on the agenda, but probably more down the priority list has now moved by far to number 1, the well-being of our people, right? So first we talk about safety, engagement, health, and then of course productivity comes into that. So if we start with people, I think one determinant of the future is that we can create an environment where people can shine. Now, a lot of things that Pratik just listed up actually about productivity and so on, those are all good for the organization, as he said. But what we're seeing now is that a determinant of sustainability in the future is what's good for the individual. So again, how do we help people shine? Because when individuals shine, teams shine, organizations shine, right? And that's what everyone's aiming to do. So that's one. Secondly, the big question that everyone is tackling now, and certainly Randstad's no exception, what is the purpose of an office? Rethinking the purpose of an office. And it happens to be that I'm leading the global initiative for Randstad across the globe on something we're calling future-proofing the way we work. And so the way we work, one element of that is the office, you know. And if I look at Nim, you're sitting in a beautiful spot in Singapore, and I recall that view. I had an office right around the same area you're at right now. But it's starting to make us question, do we need those offices? Do we need the offices the way they exist now, the function and purpose? So rethinking the purpose. My take on that, by the way, is that the future office, the office of this new world we're moving into, will be less about a place to do work and more about a place to collaborate and celebrate. So it's a place where we go to collaborate and celebrate. Work can be done anywhere. We've discovered that, as long as people have the right tools. Yeah. The third one, determinant, having the right leaders with the right skills and the agility and the resilience to navigate and lead through this new world. And you asked a great question in the opening, tenure versus experience, you know, length of time versus actual experiences. I think we've all gained 10 years of experience this year in many ways. I mean, probably 2020 is equal to 10 years. So I would say those are the three key determinants of the way.
Thanks, Paul. And people, purpose, and leadership is key. Nim, over to you. I mean, it doesn't matter if there's an overlap, because I know sometimes they can't reinvent new determinants.
I think most of the key points been mentioned, but yeah, really interesting paper by BCG. I think what we've noticed, certainly, you know, through Southeast Asia and China, is, you know, with our clientele, is that work has almost gone from a place to an activity. And even for myself, I guess, with the exception of printing, maybe, you know, I'm actually more productive at home. So I think coming back to the office, you know, the office or the place has to be compelling enough for an individual or for an employer to send their employee there. I think at its core, you know, you're looking at productivity and well-being. And that can take, you know, number of different facets, you know, with, you know, how people's homes, are they suitable, you know, to be workplaces or vice versa. So it's certainly an interesting time. And I think it's where, you know, where are your team most productive? Where do they have their greatest sense of purpose? I think culture plays a big part. I think there are companies that have been set up as a kind of a remote first. But there are other companies, you know, some very big brand, you know, I was speaking to someone from Google the other day, and they said, look, they're kind of missing the office because all these perks that they've had, you know, their free lunches and all, they you know, that's not really been translated to the work from home. So there's definitely some adjusting. What we're seeing in Singapore is maybe a bit of we're meeting in the middle. It's not about working at home, and it's not about working in the office. It's about flexibility and agility, whether that takes place in a, you know, flexible workspace similar to what we provide, or whether it's just having that. I think it's about having that human connection. You know.
Yeah, no, interesting perspective. I think you brought the element of culture, and if you were to marry the word culture with Paul when he spoke about purpose, and I think there is scope for most organizations to reimagine the purpose and reimagine the culture in the way they look at things. Pratik, your top three points.
I think the way I look at it, Suresh, one of the most important things is reimagining customer relationships. Yeah. I think many businesses were focused on a physical touch point with the customer, which for the last 9 months, 12 months has been quite difficult and may remain difficult for the next 6 to 12 months as well. So how do we keep the customer connect going, even though we are not able to meet them physically, is important. Employee well-being is quite important. I think Paul touched upon the point. And I must highlight here that while I talked about productivity improvement in my previous comment, across multiple surveys, discussions in our client conversations, it is coming out that people are working more hours now than they were working earlier. And all the time that they probably save on commute and travel is all going into Zoom calls. this may not be sustainable. And therefore, we need to identify a sustainable work model which does not result in burnout and fatigue. And the third most important element is leadership. I think leaders need to behave differently. They need to behave differently in terms of monitoring the performance of their employees. And they need to behave differently in terms of driving affiliation and engagement, building the culture, both for employees who exist in the organization today, but more importantly, employees who've joined us this year and will join us next year. How do we onboard them? How do we make them part of the company culture without probably meeting them in person will be a very challenging task, and it's up to the leaders to make it happen.
So very interesting. People, purpose, right leaders, productivity, culture, customer relationships, employee well-being, and leadership. Now, obviously, all 9 are different in the way they're saying, and I have follow-up questions on each of those 9 points. So I think I can either stop the conversation now because everything has been said. So on each of these points, we'll probably go a little deeper so that we understand what each of these elements mean. So first question to you, Paul. I mean, your organization interacts with a lot of companies and provides human services. Humans, as you are aware, are social beings. You talked about people very passionately. You talked about people. You talked about people and the purpose. You talked about people well-being in terms of safety and security. But I think the fundamental aspect of people in this changed environment is all about social connectivity. And I think the report also does bring in some elements of social connectivity. So social connectivity has gained immense importance in the year 2020. Therefore, how does social connectivity or the lack of thereof impact productivity? Because at the end of the day, corporate organizations measure effectiveness or any other tangible parameters in terms of productivity, whether it's employee revenue and so on and so forth. But organizations can only succeed if people succeed. And therefore, if that connect is not there, that well-being is not there, how do you see this whole aspect of social connectivity enabling productivity?
That's a fantastic question. And it's actually a bit of a catch-22, Suresh, right? So I'm going to bet that Pratik and Nim and you, Suresh, would agree that when we moved to complete work from home, we actually were able to get more done because we weren't interrupted by people in the office. We were at home. Finally, I can focus. Those are the kinds of comments we were hearing. Isn't that interesting? Yet we are social beings. So there is this happy medium. There is, and I think the hybrid world of work is going to offer that happy medium. You know, a work from home day in some organizations was frowned upon. In some organizations, it was quite common. So giving people the freedom and the frame to decide the way they work, I think is very important while still maintaining the human touch piece, right? So I go back to what I said about the purpose of the office as a place to collaborate and celebrate. I think we need it. If you move to a 3+2 or a 2+3 arrangement where it's work from home versus office, that's fine, or maybe once a week or whatever it's going to be. Every organization will be slightly different culturally as well. Certainly in India, if I can comment on India, where I'm sitting now, versus where I was in Japan for 25 years, India is in a very social culture. And people love to be together. And there's a joke inside Randstad. The country out of 38 countries that spends the most on cakes for celebrations in the world is India. I have never eaten so much cake in my life than I have in Randstad in India. And that's because it's a culture of celebrating together. And it's pretty hard to do that on a Zoom call, right? Although there are ways to do that. So I come back to what I said earlier. I think there's a healthy balance between the face-to-face and the remote piece. And by the way, remote is work from anywhere. And that's another thing. We talk a lot about work from home. It's not work from home, it's work from anywhere. Work can be done anywhere if we enable people with the right tools. But I think we do need that rally point from time to time where we come together with others, because we feed off of that energy. And that's just the nature of being human. So it's a tough question to answer, but I can tell you that, yes, we do work with, and just in India alone, we have 3,000 active clients we work with here. All shapes and sizes. If you talk about your small Indian local, owner, founder, promoter company versus a large global MNC, we work with them all in many different ways across the 4 corners of the country. And I can tell you that everyone is thinking about what is this new balance going to be? We're moving from presenteeism, where you would report to a desk physically, to what is the right balance. And that's where I think the differences will be partly the culture of the country and partly the culture of the company.
So the gaining momentum that I see while speaking to multiple HR heads and leaders is that in a typical HR function, you have multiple segments within that, but employee engagement was a loosely, which is celebrating birthdays, annual event, annual days, and so on and so forth, was probably for us the be all and end all of employee engagement, and possibly a survey that happens at the end of the year, and you get a score, and you realize that the employee engagement score. But I feel very strongly that the entire reimagination of the employee experience need to be relooked at from the current context, more so from the current environment that we're in. And then therefore, empathy, listening, responding to employees all becomes very critical in the aspect of social connectivity. So we must find new ways of looking at how do we address that as we go forward. So going from one major subject of social connectivity, and I'm sure we can talk multiple points around the same topic, but I just want to cover a broad areas, goes to the next aspect of people and organization, a point which all of you covered, is all about what is the right model. And therefore, the question to you, many people are of the views that the coming years, we'll see neither a fully remote working model nor a fully office location restricted model. Rather, there will be the emergence of what is now being said as a hybrid model, right? So what are your thoughts on the same? And therefore, it's nice to say hybrid, but if you were to look at values of people, engagement of people, bonding of people, teamwork, social connectivity, empathy, and people are restless. They want to get out. I know it has worked, right? Working remotely, but what is this hybrid model that we are speaking about?
Yeah, I think so. I think Paul touched on this. It's very much moving towards a work from anywhere concept. So it's not about being tied to a desk. It's not about your house. It could be a coffee shop. It could be a nice beach in Bali. I think the situation that we're currently in is that different countries are at different stages of recovery. So it's very difficult, as an international business, it's very difficult to put like a blanket approach. So for example, the activities that are happening in Singapore is very different to, let's say, activities in Malaysia for us, which is very different to the activities in Shanghai. So I think it's gonna, a lot of company from the perspective of, I guess, empathy, my personal opinion is that everything begins with curiosity. And it's hard to have those really authentic conversations, let's say, I know we're doing a Zoom call now, but it's really hard to kind of mirror that experience, from a face-to-face, whether that's, one-to-one setting or whether that's in a larger group. I think, from the perspective of teams that are in creative teams or in innovation projects, there is an element that's required of, the coming together of people. Doesn't have to be, every single day. It could be just a day a month or a few days a month. So I think companies are, to move through this process, it's about agility, it's about flexibility. There's not one size fits all. So it really depends on, the individual companies.
Okay, no, I understand. So Pratik, the question for you was, again, a question in terms of tools, and a lot of tools have been deployed, and some have worked, some have not worked, some don't know how it works, some have been skilled, some have to be reskilled, and the last 9-10 months has been a journey of learning and unlearning and so on and so forth. But I guess if there has to be an impact on productivity on some of the factors that we just spoke about a little while ago, enabling the employee with the right tools becomes a critical factor for success, whether it's in a hybrid model or whether it's working completely from remote and so on and so forth. So from your perspective, which according to you have emerged as the most important and most productive tool and practice for business during the current time? How can organizations seamlessly integrate these tools into their ecosystem? I ask this question especially to you because as BCG, as consultants, you are looking at multiple organizations, you're understanding the culture and what goes on with all these organizations that you interact with. So what are your thoughts?
So Suresh, we are coming across two broad categories of tools. I think the first is what makes employees' own work more effective and productive. So, for example, if I'm a sales staff, then do I have a lead management system wherein I can get the right leads? I have the mechanism to contact the customers, and I can enter the information once I've done the meeting or done the phone call. So, individual productivity enhancement tools are very important, but equally important over the last year or so have been the collaboration tools. And these are broadly of two categories. One is the virtual meeting tools that many of us have been using, and there are multiple platforms which have become quite relevant in the last year. All of them have certain pros and cons, but many have gained scale, and companies have adopted depending on their own comfort with either the interface or the security features. And the other is collaboration tools that help employees work better in teams. These are platforms like Slack, Trello, which companies are using at large scale, which enable employees to form small teams, form small groups, and communicate seamlessly as if they were in a room together. So I think these will become more important. For example, take BCG. We've been trying to promote the usage of tools like Slack within our case teams for many years. It didn't happen until 2020, because that's when we really felt the need to do it. And many of us got onboarded to these platforms. And same is the case for many of our clients as well.
Okay. No, that's important. I think all of us have been using this tool. The very fact that we are on this Zoom is also possibly using a tool. And I must say, it grows on you. It's not, at first you have this aversion, this doesn't work, this is not me, this is not the way we operate, this is not a culture. But then I think necessity demands that you adopt, you accept, and then it becomes part of the culture. And that's the way I've seen it evolve. I'm not one of the young guys, but I've seen it embracing myself. Now, whilst I was preparing the questions, I said everything is changing, workplace is changing, people are changing, social connectivity. I said, this is not going too far. Now, are we stretching the argument too far? So I asked myself, let me put a practical hat and put myself running an organization and ask myself, what is not changing in the workplace, right? There are a few things that will not change in the workplace. And I was trying to grapple with answers myself before I said, let me ask this question. Because at the end of the day, we're dealing with human beings. And an ecosystem in a workplace is all about human beings and their emotions, their aspirations, and so on and so forth. What do you think? I mean, as it occurs to your head, what is not changing in the workplace?
So can I take a shot at that?
This question is for all. This question is for all.
Just earlier this week, I was doing a conversation on future of work with one of BCG clients, and I was talking about the themes that we've been discussing for the last half an hour or so. And then the client asked me that 75% of our employees are actually shop floor workers, and they still have to come in every day and they have to manufacture. So nothing's changing for them. In fact, they are more unhappy because the rest of the 25% don't have to come to work. They are nicely working from home, but these 75% have to land up every day and still do their job. So how do we keep their motivation levels high, their engagement levels high? Right. What do we change for them is an important question that most companies will need to address.
Correct. So no, absolutely right. I in fact, that is one of the points that I had written for myself. Paul, your thoughts, and then Nim.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with what Pratik said. I think there are some things that are timeless and borderless. So they cross all times and eras, a crisis, good times, bad times. Some rules apply forever, as well as borderless across cultures. In fact, I just wrote a book, Suresh, about that topic, just released. Yeah.
I'll read it. I when I was Googling you, I saw the mention of the book.
Well, I was inspired partly by my time here in India, but let me tell you, one thing, I can give you several, but there are some things that are timeless. One is, since the beginning of time, regardless of culture, regardless of crisis or not, people will follow a leader who walks the talk. Okay, that's across all cultures, since the very beginning of time. Secondly, they'll follow a leader who has their back in good times and in bad. Now, whether you're face-to-face or whether you're virtual, these are virtues that you can live, right? It's behavior. And so what we found in Randstad, we've done some pretty in-depth studies around the world as to why people join companies, why they stay, and why they leave. And we have very detailed data by country, by demographic, by industry, and so on. And one of the interesting things, revealing elements, is that more and more through this crisis, what we're finding is that some things are not changing. Some things are quite static when we look at the data. One of those is that people don't join brands, especially now, this current generation. They join a cause, they join a purpose, right? So they're not joining the brand. And the companies that have figured that out have done remarkable things with employer branding. They don't talk about their brand, they talk about their people. The second observation we've made is that people don't join brands, they join purpose, and also people join people. So again, something that won't change is that leaders need to really position themselves as being human, as being as accessible, as being in touch. And I think this is really important, especially now, because we hear more about compassion and empathy. We rarely talked about that. Leadership competencies, empathy was somewhere mixed in there, and it was a tick in the box, but it's taken on a whole new meaning now as we move into this new world. So I think these are some of the things that don't change.
True. Nim?
I think at its core, human connection. We talk about technology and we talk about, but when we strip it all down, it's, people want to connect with people. You want to have a sense of belonging as well, a sense of purpose. I think experience matters as well. So one of the things that, we try and focus on are hospitality-led experiences. So when people come into our workspaces, it doesn't feel like an office. It doesn't feel like, it feels more of a hotel. And that's a way whether, you're working for a company which is 2 people or, if it's 100 people, you still have that same level of experience. So I think, that, at its core, social interactions, I think that's what people are craving.
Yeah. So leading on from what all 3 of you said, and I think if I were to kind of synthesize it to purpose, leadership, and culture, I think few things that possibly not change from my years of experience of running organization is the ability to inspire will not change, whether you're in remote or whether you are in not remote. I think leadership is all about inspiration and inspiring. And if organizations have a DNA which has a purpose and a culture integrated, then the ability to inspire will not change. The second is, again, people finding meaning in the work in the organization. Like Paul said, it's no longer about brand. It's no longer about brand. It's all about purpose. And therefore, is my big P aligned with the small p? Is the organization's purpose aligned to my personal purpose? And therefore, if these 2 purposes are aligned, those things will not change. And I think fundamentally, whether you're in pre-post-COVID, whether you're in a hybrid structure, employees' expectation in the employment, whether the organization is providing the ecosystems for learning, skilling, upskilling, and so on and so forth, those things will not change. On the contrary, I've seen that over the last 10 months, the amount of learning and development that has actually gone either through guest speakers or courses or, lots of people coming in talking to you. It's been I've never seen such learning and development activity ever done in my 30 years of my work history. And so therefore, I think these are possibly some of the things that possibly will not change in the workplace. So going back to Paul again, and in your opening, you spoke about leadership as possibly one of the key determinants. And I just want to expand the aspect of leadership. We covered it in terms of what will not change. The biggest role in the post-pandemic reconstruction will certainly be played by the leadership, and then they're actually playing it. We're already witnessing stories of resilient leaders who have managed to bring their business back from the brink of extinction. There are innumerable examples. What are the challenges? What are the biggest challenges that await for these leaders in the post-pandemic period? And I want you to kind of detail it.
Yeah, sure. Let me take a slightly different angle on the question, but we'll get to the same point. So first of all, if we look back, I mean, hey, we all had Vision 2020 or some sort of fancy sounding plan since what, maybe 2015, 2016, we started to have grand visions, right? Made by a lot of smart people. And I can say, Pratik, I know a lot of your people, you got some very smart people in BCG around the world, some of the smartest people I know.
Including
Nobody, including Pratik, of course. But I'm going to guess that Pratik, nowhere in your slides in 2017, 18, 19, did you have a slide on a global pandemic in 2020? That was nowhere in anybody's plan, even the smartest people in the world. Okay, the visionaries, the visionaries. So we talk about visionary leadership. Well, none of us has a crystal ball. So that humbled us all. But the leaders that got it right and were prepared, and I would say thrived rather than survived through 2020, are the leaders that built an organization that was agile, that in a way was prepared for anything. We use the word future-proof, future-ready, the guts to pivot and so on. And leaders who were humble enough to know that it's time to pivot. The strategy that we all formulated back in 2019 in the fall, getting ready for 2020, that strategy needed to be changed. Some leaders were not able to do it. And so we saw, if I paint the world with a simple two-stroke brush, there was one type of leader. I should say actually the one type, everyone did the same thing. We first immediately went into our caves, right? We retreated into our caves. All leaders did that. We made sure our people were safe. We made sure we were safe and we were in the cave. Now here's where the difference came. Some leaders stayed in the cave and others crawled out and peeked to see what was happening. And the real gutsy ones stepped out pretty quickly. And they led organizations through the new world of ambiguity and adversity. Others remained in the cave. And I see that clear difference. And then the performance is also related in the organization to the way the leader behaved through the crisis. So this has been very revealing. And even in my own organization, if I look at the leaders around me and my own organization in India, it's been remarkable. I've been very pleased actually to see so many of my leaders step up during crisis, because we all know, if you want to see what a leader's made of, look at them during a crisis, not when times are good. When the ship is shaking and the boat is in danger of sinking, that's when leaders step up or don't. So I would say certainly when we talk about leadership now and into the future and beyond, in good times and in bad, in this new world, absolutely the ability to be agile and lead teams to be agile, to be ready for anything. The leaders who I said earlier are human, who are not afraid to admit that, you know what, that strategy I just shared with you a month ago, out the door. We've got to replace it because it's a new day.
Sure, Paul. Have you seen trust being understood differently from what it was understood before?
I'll talk about my personal experience. Now that we talk about leader as human, I've been humbled this year. I mean, I'm almost 53 years old, so I've grown up in a world, in an era where I led in a certain way, like many leaders of my generation. Right? It was about face-to-face. It was about metrics, about productivity, and so on. And then here we were in this new world, and I had to talk to a computer screen using tools that I'd never used before. And suddenly I was supposed to be, come on, that's not how things work, right? So it was a lot of relearning, and I was humbled, certainly that, I think what I realized is that instead of pretending to know what I was doing, instead of pretending that everything was okay, that I needed to be human. I needed to admit to the team that, you know what, we're in choppy waters right now. It's really foggy. We can't see 5 feet in front of us, especially back in March, April, May. But one thing I promise you is I've got the wheel and we're going to get through this. We're going to get through this together. Sure. One day this will end. And I think that element of leadership is the difference between those who are surviving and those who are thriving. Yeah.
Sure. Makes sense. So the next question leading on from there for organizations is, with so much changes, with so much of decisions to be taken, and if you were to follow the classical definition of strategy, structure, people, a lot of changes need to be done in the organizational design. And this question to you, Pratik, is that what, according to you, have been the key learnings for organizations during the pandemic, and what are their implications for organizational design going forward?
2-3 things come to mind, Suresh. I think firstly, as Paul also touched upon, I think agility will be a key attribute that organizations will have to be designed around. Because, just like this pandemic happened, many disruptions can happen in the future. And resilient organizations will be the one which will be built on agile principles, whereby people can quickly adapt to the new reality. The other important learning of the last year has been that new talent models will emerge. I think the kind of skills and the quantity of skills that organizations need will change. Also, this virtual world has probably made us realize that we have access to much larger talent pools, because physical boundaries are probably much less relevant, if relevant at all. And therefore, one, the need of the organization for talent changes, and the supply of talent also changes. And that will become an important component as we think of the organization of the future.
Correct. No, I have a few questions on talent. I'll come to that. So, I mean, expanding on your thoughts in terms of agility, speed of learning, I quite agree, because I think the old organizational design was built around stability, hierarchy, and control. Yeah. Right? And I think organizations are still grappling with, should I move away from stability, hierarchy, and control? And I think the 21st century stakeholder requirement is all about disruption, agility, and speed of learning. And then therefore, if organizational designs can be built around disruption, agility, and speed of learning, then I think you're making the right steps in terms of addressing people and organization and the way you look at the scope of work going forward. Nim, to you the question, therefore, now coming back to leadership, CEOs, and the people who really matter, talking specifically about the senior management and all the way up to, let's say, the C-suite executives, how can you now define their objectives and key responsibilities in the post-pandemic era? What are the key results that organizations should expect from them? I mean, we've discussed a lot many things, but putting everything on a guy and saying, okay, I need change, I need the social collaboration, I need trust, I need resilience, it's kind of putting too many things, and yet I need your results and productivity should not fall. What should be the expectation?
So there's a Japanese word, so Paul will probably know this. It's called Kaizen, which means, I guess, constant improvement or constant iteration. So very much, if you're speaking to innovation teams, I think it's not about, if we go back to 2015, I don't, if anyone asked them, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I think everyone got that answer wrong. All right, so I think it's more of a case of, yes, having that vision long-term, having that sense of purpose, but also, deploying that agility in terms of what do we need to do next week, next quarter, next 6 months. So it's actually balancing that and having that transparency. I think what COVID has allowed is, leaders can portray a certain amount of vulnerability where perhaps they couldn't, and providing trust to your employees. You may not see their work, and I think that was a challenge for a lot of companies because they couldn't see their employees. So I think it's something that needs to be worked on, and it's moving more towards, I guess, an outcome focused as opposed to activities, and allowing people to work where they're most productive. So we have teams that very much they're productive working remotely, coming into the office for set meetings. We have other teams that really need to be huddled with other people. The situation in Singapore perhaps is slightly different to other countries, so it does permit, there aren't really so many restrictions with regards to that, but I think that's compared to, let's say, Malaysia, for example. But yeah.
So as a lead up to all the points that each one of you spoke about, whether it was people, purpose, leadership, productivity, culture, purpose, reimagining the customer relationship, employee well-being, and so on and so forth, it all boils down to one single point. In this new requirement that we have, how do you build a high performance team in these times, right? I mean, you still need them to perform. We've talked about reskilling, tooling, and so on and so forth. Are there newer ways of relooking at, organizations and teams and performance? I spoke about experience not being relevant. I spoke about skills being relevant. It's no point saying I've got 10 years experience, but if I don't have the required skill in today's day and age, it might just not matter. And so the question to all of you is that how do you build a high performance team in these times? Paul, you want to start?
I think a lot of what we talked about is relevant to answer this question, but I'll come back to the core. Let's call it the North Star of leading into the future. It's going to come back to engagement. And I think if you look at, and some of what we're hearing now from the companies that we work with, both global and local as well here in India and also in the region, a lot of companies are looking ahead to January 1st to setting goals for their leadership team. And it's a whole new process. It used to be a lot of copying and pasting, right? If you looked at even my own KPIs, never was employee engagement one of my deliverables. And there are some companies that are on the leading edge of that and have that for their MD level and their CXO level. But certainly that wasn't a common goal. It will become a common goal across the board. Employee engagement, in other words, knowing that the team feels included, feels part of the mission and the vision and has a voice, will be a key determinant of a high-performing organization. The question is, how do you do that in the new world? We talked about it. I mean, using tools, the balance between face-to-face and virtual and so on. I think that's going to be a key difference moving forward in the new world. So, high performance is defined the same way, by the way, in good times or bad. When you talk about business, and we talk about for-profit business, the notion of business from the beginning of time is to grow and show a profit. No, unless you're a unicorn that's losing a lot of money and has a massive valuation, but that's in a different world from where I run. So we're talking about the purpose of business is to create gainful employment, to provide livelihoods, to provide challenges and opportunities, to make a positive impact on society, and deliver return to stakeholders in the process. So all of those measurements of high performance won't change. I think we're going to see this one come in and play a key role, and that's the engagement piece. How connected are people? How happy are they? How fulfilled are they working for that organization?
Prateek?
I think firstly, completely agree with Paul. I think the engagement element will be most critical. And as we get into 2021, it'll be key to see how companies solve for that. As I said earlier, different companies are trying different things. We'll see what works. The only other element I'll add is, again, while I agree with Paul that high performance is high performance, whether it's a good year or a bad year, one of the trends that we are seeing is that the metrics that the companies are tracking are also evolving. Instead of just being output focused or unidimensional, I think there are many new metrics which are coming into play, which are also even input metrics. Because in this new way of operating, managers also need to devise new ways of measuring performance. And I think those metrics are evolving, and that trend will also become relevant going forward.
Name your thoughts.
I think Prateek and Paul pretty much summarized that, but I think certainly employee engagement, that's top of the agenda for us, not only internally within our own teams, but also as part of a service that we would provide to our clients. So we might have, whether it's an MNC, whether it's an SME, it's not just about an office now. There are these other components, through experience, making employees feel a part of a greater purpose, providing access to additional resources, through learning, for example. But yeah, it's I would say, employee experience for us, certainly top of our agenda.
But Prateek, is the notion of talent being redefined in organizations? When one hears a lot about, we recognize talent, we reward talent, we let talent go up the ladder, and this whole debate of career ladder versus career matrix, right? It's not the notion of X number of years of experience and you go from one step to the other. You're talented and you're inputted, but but talent is still not. I mean, organizations talk about talent, but are they doing something significant? And I see a correlation of high performance to how you address talent, and are you seeing that change happening?
So one of the changes we are witnessing, Suresh, and it's still not prevalent across all organizations, but we talked a lot about agility earlier. And I think it's very important if we really want to build an agile organization, a high performing organization, to build what we call a Y-shaped career path. So there is a traditional career path, which is like a ladder, as you're rightly talking about, but we need to more and more reward and acknowledge expertise in the organization, which can only happen on non-traditional career paths. As an expert, I may not want to manage large teams. I just want to build deeper expertise. And the organization should provide me that option to go on the other leg of the Y. And that will become very important. Organizations need to understand that and really need to provide those options to their employees.
And what about issues like speed of doing things, measurement of rewards. I'm just saying, I'm just picking up one or two variables within the high performance. I'm saying, is speed understood better in today's day and world? Traditionally, organizations looked at KPIs and, I'll do it tomorrow. Whilst leadership is all about agility and speed, is speed recognized as a core action point? I mean, Paul, Pratik, anyone?
I'll comment on this from an R&R standpoint, because there's an interesting connection, something that's emerging right now. Hey, by the way, do you remember before COVID, way back in the old days before COVID, when we used to talk about Gen Z and millennials?
Yeah.
I don't think I've heard that word once during COVID. Every single discussion I was having pre-COVID was about, how to lead millennials and Gen Zs and how to, the workforce of the future. That's been shelved for now the COVID generation, I guess. We're all part of that, by the way. You don't have to be in your 20s to be part of the COVID generation. And now this has all brought us together. It's interesting. But one of the things we've discovered, though, is that, let's say the workforce of the future, we can name them whatever we like, but they do want to be recognized and rewarded quickly. So to take a different angle on speed, and certainly HR professionals are faced with this challenge. How do we reward in a fair way, which is also swift? So just like organizations are doing away with annual appraisals, those are kind of seen as obsolete. Why would you talk to somebody in December about something they did in April? I mean, it doesn't help the person improve. So what we see is this ongoing rolling, approach to great conversations. Same thing with rewards and recognition. I think we are moving at a much faster pace nowadays. So we need to reward and recognize more quickly. One more thing is that what I'm seeing a trend here with organizations that are, again, thriving rather than surviving, that they realize that the world is moving so fast, and the need for change and agility is obviously increasing. So instead of putting someone in a seat and expecting them to be part of a team and focusing on something long-term, we're seeing a lot of organizations move to projects.
Yeah.
So people are moving around into different projects to be able to build different skills, and let's call them muscles, right? As they move. So I might be 3 months working with Pratik as my manager, and I learn a lot from Pratik, and I put on some muscle, and then the next project begins and I get to go over and work with Nim as my manager for 3 months and so on. And companies that are creating an ecosystem internally that allows for that are also are absolutely accelerating and are going to be future-proofed.
Terrific answer. We're coming close to our scheduled 1 hour. There are questions coming in from some of the participants. So I'll just pose the questions that are being. What are the 3 major aspects, according to you, would you suggest that HR personnel to be future ready and engage employees in a meaningful manner? Anyone wants to attempt taking that answer to a question? Anyone?
I wouldn't give 3. Oh, sorry, Nim, go ahead.
No, sorry, I was just trying to read. Go for it, Paul. I was just reading the question.
Okay, I'd rather not be limited to 3. I'll mention 1, and I think maybe the other fellows can have a say. So if we talk about engagement and so on, we've done so much. Every organization I talk to now, that's where all the focus is for HR. But I would take it 1 step further. I think HR, crisis brings opportunity. The HR leader has an opportunity to be in the C-suite, be in the room with the CEO. So I can tell you in my own organization, HR is playing such a big role more than ever. And that's a wake-up call. Should have been the case before COVID, but okay, I admit that. And I have 2 people by my side. One on my right is my CFO, one on my left is my CHRO. In any big decisions I'm making, in any adversity we're facing now, it's the 3 musketeers. And I think every organization needs to welcome HR to the table. And HR needs to be a confidant and advisor for the CEO. So they can play a very important role. Yeah.
Pratik, you can take this question. This is a pretty straightforward question. What's the future of sales and business development in remote working environment?
Sure. But before I answer that question, Suresh, on the previous one, I just want to add one attribute which will be very important for HR personnel, which is empathy.
Yeah,
I think we've seen employees go through a lot in the last 1 year. Challenges will still remain, and that's the muscle that HR needs to build quite strongly. HR professionals generally have that, but I think it will become more and more important going forward.
I think also one thing, Pratik, is that when you're in the workplace, everyone has the same resources, same tools. But at home, maybe I'm living with, my family, and it's 3 generations under one roof. Maybe that I don't have I only have my kitchen table to work from.
Yes.
So I certainly think empathy, should work, or hopefully can work on both sides, not just from HR, but also from employees as well.
Yes, absolutely. And in terms of sales and marketing, I do banking, and banking has traditionally been a very high touch sales function, right? You have to meet someone to sell them a loan or get them to open an account. But even in a high touch profession like banking, companies have found different models to almost give a personal meeting like experience to customers by deploying the right tools, doing video conversations, etc. So I think just like many functions that we've spoken about, even for sales and marketing, the future will be hybrid. There might still be certain roles which will require physical touch points, but a lot can be done on call and videos. And most importantly, the Indian consumer, and I'm sure that's true around the world as well, is ready for it today.
Yeah,
they probably weren't 12 months back, but today they are.
I quite agree, and I putting my FMCG hat and looking at the business numbers of most FMCG companies. They have developed new models, whether calling up the grocery store, picking up the orders from there, making sure that there is a supply chain efficiency that's working in. So I think they've got more productive, and one has to believe that there is always a way to solve things. And if you don't believe that there's a way to solve things, you'll never find the solution. Okay, the last question. We are all witnessing the low-code revolution, which is on the brink. How should a progressive organization address virtual hiring and recruitment, onboarding, training, development and retention attrition? Maybe Paul is Paul should answer this question. Paul,
yeah,
sorry, I'm pushing the question to you.
No, and I should have a very eloquent answer to this question, considering the business that I'm in. We put 60,000 people to work every day alone just in India.
Yeah.
It's 800,000 people to work every day around the world. And this was one of the first things that we had to deal with very quickly, was how do we bring in talent, onboard them, put them into a role, engage with them, ensure that they have everything they need to shine again. And that's a big challenge, especially when you're moving from a very analog way of working. And many organizations have faced the same challenge. Well, we're all learning on the run, let me tell you. But I can tell you that we actually went from being quite analog in many of our processes to being almost entirely digital in just a few months. So again, crisis brings opportunity. We can now onboard people into our organization. We can put them into a role. We can ensure they're paid, they're engaged, they get their rewards and recognition, et cetera, et cetera. We can do all of that in a virtual way now. So I think, embracing the tools to do that are very important. But, I had a really interesting experience that I've never had, certainly in my career. I had to hire a CXO level, a direct report for me, very important role in my organization here this year. And this entire process was done virtually. I still haven't met this person.
Okay.
Onboarded and making an impact, by the way, which is remarkable, because back in, again, the old days in COVID, we would have had face-to-face interviews, 2-3 rounds to different people in the organization. We'd have an external assessment and so on, make the offer, and then those days are gone. So I think we all have to become, we'll use that word again, agile. We have to be creative. We have to embrace, I'm going to use a phrase, tech for touch. We should embrace technology so that we can give that touch. And I think that's a big change for a lot of us. But it's so important to answer that question. Every organization is facing this right now, and it's critical that we embrace technology for touch through the hiring process.
So thanks, Paul. Before we sign off, I'm going to ask you all one question. And what advice do you have for leaders to be future-proofed? I mean, what if there was one advice that you'd give leaders to be future-proofed, what would it be? We can start with anybody. Anyone wants to go first?
I'll give it a shot. So through this pandemic, I actually took it as an opportunity to grow and learn and so on. Replacing the commuting time. Yeah, you're right. Schedules were packed morning till night, but I carved out time. And actually, Marshall Goldsmith is my coach. I engaged with Marshall Goldsmith, and Marshall's coach was Peter Drucker. And Peter Drucker taught him a lot of things that he's now, Marshall's sharing with me. And one of the things Peter Drucker taught Marshall that really speaks to me is that the mission of the leader is not to prove how smart he is, but to make a positive impact on the world. So if you ask me, what is a guiding principle moving forward? It's leader as enabler, not leader as one who knows, but leader as one who enables people to shine.
Perfect. Pratik?
So I would say my suggestions for the leaders would be: one, embrace the new reality and rethink your business model. As you're doing that, start with the customer and just remember to elevate your employees and be empathetic.
Very nice. Nim?
Yeah, pretty much what Pratik and Paul mentioned. I would say, very much, listen to your employees. Have a clear vision in terms of, where you're looking to go, and really it's about communication as well. So whether you're talking about the shift from like KPIs to OKRs, a lot of companies adopting that. It's having that transparency. There's no right or wrong way. I think what COVID has allowed us to do is portray a certain amount of vulnerability, so employees don't judge us too much. But yeah, really start from that point. And with I guess with empathy, one of the things our teams like to practice is more on that empathetic curiosity, but have that from not just at the top, but across the company.
And if I were to answer the same question from my perspective, I would probably use the word love. Set the conditions for people to thrive. And I think if you show love to the people, they are bound to respond, they're bound to do well. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Nim. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Pratik. Thank you, Speaking. Thank you, BCG. It's been a lovely interaction with all of you. And I'm sure we'll find more forums for us to pick on other topics and discuss. But thank you for taking the time. Thank you so much, and stay safe. Have a good evening. It's Friday. Have fun. Thank you so much.